Hello and welcome to DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, recovering from having had to watch the president's UN speech, and I am joined by Riley Fessler and Minna Stein. How are you guys?
Pretty good.
Also recovering.
Also recovering. Well, it was not. I was not. Did you stay up late to watch Jimmy Kimmel?
I did not.
Riley?
No, I can't say
No.
that I did.
Nor did I, because I don't watch those shows really, except to the extent to which things crop up in the morning on social media, which is fine, just enough for me. That's how I watch SNL too at this point. Well, what's the first story you got there, Riley?
Well, funny you should mention the UN speech because in his speech to the United Nations, Donald Trump presented Trumpism in its rawest form, criticizing globalism and multilateral bodies while promoting his America First ideology. He attacked the UN for its perceived ineffectiveness, questioned its purpose, and claimed it was promoting illegal immigration rather than stopping it. Trump also directed harsh criticism towards Europe, arguing that its embrace of green energy and open immigration policies would lead to its ruin. The speech, which was seen by supporters as unplugged and by critics as unhinged, also touched on the war in Ukraine and the need for European allies to stop buying Russian energy.
What What do you mean unplugged? I mean, it was just like him, like on stage, like riffing, being true Trump. Is that the idea?
I think, yeah, unfiltered, unplugged.
Unfiltered, yeah. Yeah, it was demented. I mean, it was a real low point. I mean, it was a low point for U.S. diplomacy because the guy stood up and what he said was, "I know what I'm doing. All your countries are going to hell." He also said there was once a hat that said Trump was right about everything, and you want to know something? I was right about everything. And he was offensive to lots of people. He said the mayor of London was going to impose Sharia law in London. He blamed the problems in Ukraine on the leadership there while Zelensky was sitting in the audience, even though he did a complete flip flop on Ukraine a little bit later, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he was, all over the place, kind of low energy. Started out complaining that the teleprompter wasn't working, that the escalator didn't work. And I'm like, the escalator didn't work. An escalator that doesn't work is stairs. Like, is that a problem? And he attacked the UN, said the UN perhaps shouldn't even exist. His attack on green energy and the whole idea of climate change was extraordinary in the sense that it was divorced from any scientific underpinning. His attack on the Greens was particularly noteworthy since the woman presiding over the event was one of the leaders of Germany's Green Party. Um, there was really nothing about the speech that was, worthy of kind of a U.S. president, with the possible exception that he said he wanted to stop the spread of biological weapons, which, who could be against that? And he threw in, apparently, sort of off the cuff nuclear weapons. And it's, be great if he actually believed this stuff. But he was clearly riffing. His, policy is that we should modernize our nuclear arsenal. And what he was really getting at with the biological weapons was something he touched upon in the speech, which is his enduring theory that COVID came from laboratory experiments. But this was just, I don't know, it was kind of an old man shouting at the world. In a column that I wrote about it for the Daily Beast. Spoiler alert, I conclude the column with a couple of quotes that sound a little bit like Trump, but actually weren't Trump. They're King Lear out on the heath, losing his mind, shouting into the skies as, kind of crazy old guy. Because that's what it felt like. It was a real embarrassment for the U.S. And the U.S. helped found the United Nations. And here was a guy, saying, "Well, I've solved 7 wars, and the UN didn't help me at all." I mean, we know he didn't solve 7 wars. There were probably more lies in this speech than in any speech in UN history. But time after time, when he could attack the UN, when he could attack the people he was listening to, he did. This is a guy who's a volcano of grievances, and we got to see the volcano erupt yesterday.
President Trump made a surprising reversal on the Ukraine-Russia war, declaring after a meeting with President Zelensky that Ukraine can win back all its lost territory with European and NATO support. This marks a sharp shift from his earlier stance urging Ukraine to concede land to Russia and questioning its chances of success. Trump now calls Russia's military a paper tiger and supports NATO defending its airspace, while Zelensky praised the new position as a game changer and a sign of possible post-war security guarantees from the U.S.
Yeah, well, let's just wait a minute before we conclude that there has been a big shift here. There is certainly a shift in tone, and it is certainly a welcome shift in tone, because after all, Ukraine are the good guys defending democracy, Europe, and our interests, and Russia is the bad guy. But here's what Trump didn't do, and he did a long social media post on this same issue today. He did not announce any change in U.S. policy. He said that Ukraine could win if the EU supported Ukraine. And until he says, we will send more arms, we will send more money, we will restore the flows that were coming during the Biden administration, we will take tougher stance against Russia. We will support the freezing, the seizing of Russian assets and transferring them to Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Until he does anything concrete, this is just an old man shouting at his TV set. And that's where we are. He's changed his position because Russia stood him up. But he didn't change it so far that he couldn't flip right back if, there's some other development on that front. So, praise him for, sounding better than he sounded in the past. But let's wait. Let's wait and see whether he actually acts better than he has in the past.
Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, has been criticized as a national censor for his efforts to combat what he perceives as liberal bias in broadcast media. Following an incident involving the temporary yanking of Jimmy Kimmel Live, Carr has become more vocal in his mission to empower local TV stations to reject programming they disagree with. He has since reopened investigations into major networks like ABC, NBC, and CBS for alleged biased programming, and has suggested that the FCC could pull licenses from stations that fail to serve the public interest. Carr, a Trump appointee, is now working to transform the FCC into a protector of conservative speech, a move that has drawn criticism from both Democratic and some Republican lawmakers.
Let me object for one moment to the use of the term protector. I don't object to the term censor, but he actually wants to turn the media into being an advocate for conservative speech. In fact, he wants to do it while Trump wants to go after platforms that are promoting ideas that he doesn't agree with. They're trying to create one-sided media in America. Trump did a kind of a rant overnight on social media that was like, I can't believe they put Jimmy Kimmel back on, and 90% of what goes on there is pro-Democrat, and that makes this a campaign contribution, so we're going to investigate them for that. So I think we're in an early chapter of this, but we have seen that the public response can make a difference. The response of leaders in the industry, like the many artists who stood up for Jimmy Kimmel, can make a difference. And I think we've also seen a couple of other things, which include, following the reinstatement of Jimmy Kimmel by ABC, we had Nexstar and Sinclair stations saying they weren't going to carry him. And they didn't, by the way. Here in DC, you couldn't see him. But it streams. You could go to abc.com, or you could go to Jimmy Kimmel's site, or you could look for it on YouTube. And so the structure of media isn't what it used to be. In fact, I was thinking about that yesterday, and this is a little bit beyond my expertise, although we're going to have a show talking a little bit about media a little later in the week. But Nexstar, for example, they want the FCC to change the rules that say you can only own stations in up to 39% of US markets, and they want to increase it to 80 or have the rule eliminated so they could have coverage across all markets. But I do think we need to ask the question is what is the value of a broadcast station in a streaming world? It's less than it was. And having a monopoly in broadcast stations or having a lot of reach with broadcast stations is less than it was. That's just, I'm not saying that the rules should be changed because honestly, I think, we could do more to protect end users, and we have to recognize that the airwaves are owned by the people and not, alternatively by one political party or another. But we are at a time of transition here. And that time is complicated by the fact that we have a president and the head of the FCC that want to put their thumb on the scale and dictate what you listen to, dictate who you can hear from, shut down voices they don't like. That's un-American. It's contrary to the First Amendment. It undermines democracy. It's really bad. And it's going to get worse before it gets better.
FBI agents recently searched former National Security Advisor John Bolton's office and found documents marked classified, including materials related to weapons of mass destruction, U.S. strategic communications, and the U.S. mission to the UN. The search was part of an ongoing investigation into possible violations of the Espionage Act and unauthorized retention of classified information, though no charges have been filed. While the Justice Department cited national security concerns in limiting public access to case records, the discovery raised legal risks for Bolton and has sparked speculation about political motivations, given his strained history with President Trump.
Yeah, I mean, we all can see the dark irony in this, of course, because those are exactly the kind of documents that were discovered in, the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago and elsewhere in Donald Trump's possession. And he managed to get a judge to help him beat that. And this is another one of these instances where Trump is literally trying to use the kinds of techniques that were used against him, against his enemies. But of course, the Justice Department is controlled by him. They act as though they're his lawyers. It's a very different situation than we've ever seen before in this country. And I think John Bolton's going to have a heck of a fight on his hand unfairly. I think a lot of people that they target will. And, frankly, that's half of their goal. It's not all about winning the cases. It's about draining the bank accounts of the people they attack by making them hire lots of lawyers and spend millions of dollars, which many of them do not have. We talked about this with Miles Taylor, who is a target of some of these lawsuits on our podcast, on our Deep State Radio podcast earlier. And you should go back and listen because government intimidation is also sometimes a form of harassment. It's a form of punishing people without any due process. And as we know, this administration is not very fond of due process and is real fond of retribution. So we need to watch this carefully.
After significant cost-cutting measures by the Department of Government Efficiency, hundreds of federal employees who manage government workspaces for the General Services Administration are now being asked to return to their jobs. The mass firings, which were part of an aggressive push to reduce the federal workforce, left the GSA understaffed and unable to perform basic functions, leading to costly confusion and expired leases. This reversal mirrors similar rehiring efforts at other agencies, suggesting that the downsizing led by Elon Musk went too far and created more problems than it solved. The GSA is now in triage mode as it works to rectify the situation, and the congressional watchdog is investigating what transpired.
Doge. Remember Doge, guys? We should have a little nostalgia. We should do one of those sort of look back in history kind of programs, about the good old days of Doge. Because like 8 months ago, that's all we could talk about. Doge, 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 and all they were doing and cutting back. And what a flop. I mean, Elon's still a gajillionaire, and apparently had some kind of reconciliation with Trump at the Charlie Kirk event. But a lot of what Doge has done has just been demonstrated to be bad work done by incompetent, inexperienced people in a bad way. And it has had to be undone because the people, you get, hey, here's an idea, or here's an observation. Don't have people who don't know anything about government agencies come in and restructure those agencies within days. It will ultimately have proven to be more costly to the United States by a lot, and than economically efficient in any way at all. By the way, as we are doing this, there is a breaking story about a shooting at an ICE facility where a number of immigrants waiting processing were injured. Apparently, the shooter was found later on a rooftop, dead. We literally just happening as we are recording this, so we will catch up on it tomorrow, as we will on all the events that occur here. And we will have a special Deep State Radio looking at the big substantive story of the week at UNGA, which is recognition for the Palestinian state and what that may, entail and how Israel may respond. And so we've got a special episode of Deep State Radio on that coming your way a little later today. And of course, everything else, Words Matter, the Daily Blast, Scylla Consciousness, our AI Energy and Climate podcast, whole range of things for you here at the DSR Network. And if you like them, go to membership, become a member. It's only a few bucks a month. And it helps provide the kind of voice and independent media that really piss off the people in the government that want to control what you hear. And if that's a goal of yours for today, support us. It'll help you towards that goal.